for joining us in the next edition of the Fire Up series. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Lax Chepuri with us as a serial entrepreneur. Presently, one of his companies is TechnoGen, and like he's also one of the 6 general partners for a new fund that just got its approval and was launched last week, called SucSEED Innovation Fund, which is an early stage technology startup fund. And Lax is himself an active investor, has been investing in startups. Lax is based out of US, in the Washington, DC area, and invests in startups in the US and India and actively mentors startups. So Lax, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you very much for having me here.
So Lax, I think given what you're doing and with all the app topic to discuss with you, it's a startup in India making a foray into the US. The first foray. Where do they start? How do they start? I'm sure some of the portfolio startups that you have been helping with would have been, that aspect is one area where you bring very specific value in terms of getting them to the US. So let's just start with that. Like, what kind of startups? I mean, everybody wants to go to different markets, but what kind of startups should even consider the US market? Because not for everybody it would make sense. So what are the ideal startups that should be considering US market?
Yeah, I mean, what you see, Ramesh, of late in last few years, as you are aware, mostly artificial intelligence still has a lot of scope in US and elsewhere in the market, right? So, and second one I see is remote work related startups, because whatever happened in last 6 months changed the whole dynamics in the world, the pandemic. So if you see the heat map, there are like 6-7 companies related to remote work really trending well, because they were there before. It's not like they are not there. But if you see, when companies need, corporations need some kind of way they can get into all this. How do they track employees? How do they track monitoring of the employees, productivity, whatnot, right? So that's something you can be fact that remote work related startups are really doing good job of late. So third one to name, by the way, I didn't see any company from India in the remote work space, not in the heat map where, you can, so that's the gap. If you, a lot of young entrepreneurs coming in, they can look at that as one of the opportunity. If you want to get into the market, if there's a application or a product that they want to get in, remote work related products are really way to go now. Knowing next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, God knows what's going to happen. But I think this is kind of going to be a culture now, remote work. So, but as I said, there's no company now on the heat map related to remote work, Ramesh. So that's something to consider or come into US market. The third one being the voice recognition technology, Ramesh. So that's something, again, taking big strides in the market. So
now in the contactless mode, so it's getting more importance.
Absolutely, but not only contactless, right? You wanted to, the corporations want to track the productivity of the employees. See, they cannot say no for the remote work, but what is the next, right? So you wanted to make sure the productivity is there. Not to say monitoring has to be there. People are working across the globe now. Now you see Google said next until June they said people can work from home. So what next, right? So how do you make sure that the productivity is there? So there are a lot of companies, 6-7 companies trending. Couple of them from Europe and a couple of them in USA trending in that space. Of course, Zoom, we all know Zoom became like so many billions now in like next 6 months. Yeah, just 6 months, it became like 50 billion to 500 billion kind of range. Now they're trending it, right? So, but I'm talking about the startups, especially in that arena. Now companies are looking at products which can help productivity, monitoring, activity tracking, whatnot, not to bother the employee. So that's one thing to look at it, Ramesh. So third one being the voice recognition technology. I mean, we all know whatever the technologies development happening. So that's one to be in, voice recognition. Fourth one being the big data, right? So we have been talking big data for the last 10 years. So that's still trending and taking the market lead in terms of big data.
So from almost every segment you described is a technology platform at some level.
Yes.
And so those are the ones, probably we don't understand the business environment well enough. So long as it's fairly domain agnostic, is that where you see a bigger possibility for Indian startups to try the US?
Yes. Yeah.
So on the strengths of the technologies where they can come in. So, okay. So now technology is of course there in everything you mentioned, but still, are there any specific domains that is more compelling? I mean, technology applied, any of these technologies applied to certain domains. Are there any
Yeah,
specific domains that are more
basically,
compelling to consider?
yeah, if you look at Ramesh, edge computing, but that has no domain specific, right? So you can do edge computing is becoming very trending technologies now.
Hmm.
So
Maybe I'm
if you
not
want,
loud enough.
yeah, if you look at technology specific or domain specific, if you see healthcare being
Huh.
prominent now happening because of whatever the changes coming in, that's gonna take a lead on that too. So hyper personalization is one thing to
Huh.
consider. If so, cybersecurity, healthcare is gonna dominate the market in next 10 to 20 years, no matter what it is.
Huh.
So hyper personalization is one thing to look at it. Okay, so and the Internet of Things, we know everything is now life is all around Internet of Things. So a lot of companies, sensor based, this, that, and all, food analytics. So many companies coming in, right? So it's not one use case, Ramesh. It's not one domain I can think of, right? You can apply across all the domains, but the best technology is Internet of Things, right? That's
Hmm.
something to look at it. And sixth one, I look at it cyber security. So if anybody wanted to get into cyber security, I don't see a big product coming out of India market on the cyber security, prominent one.
Yes. Yes.
And US, federal government is the biggest customer, as you know, Ramesh. It's 100 plus billion they procure in a year. IT spend just alone on that. So how many startups are really focusing or entering into the federal government, right? There's some hand holding required, mentoring required,
Hmm.
that all available, but not many focusing on the federal side of the world really. So that's
Hmm.
something, maybe during your conversations you do mention that any cyber security company, health, IT, lot of opportunity in the federal space and the
Hmm.
state governments. I know we little hesitant to work with governments in India. I mean, no offense again, but here there's a lot of market. They have a lot of programs to encourage the startups, and they give grants and whatnot, right? So if the product has the substance in it,
So
so
does it
they,
need a local somebody present locally to take them an SI or somebody, or can they go approach directly
no, no, they
if it
can
is federal?
approach. There are launch pads. So even we are thinking about one federal launch pad to bring all these startups
Oh,
together.
specifically targeting government use cases.
Yes, government use
Okay.
cases. Definitely, you
Hmm.
need to work with SI or a mentor of a strategic partner, something like that.
Huh.
You cannot, by nature of it, right? You cannot work directly with the federal government. But if you partner with any SIs,
Hmm.
Lockheed of the world, North of the world, right? There's a lot of opportunity. If the product has a good use case,
Hmm.
the government appreciates,
You
and
will
even they give
consider it.
grants. SBIR, STTR, and all those things are there, Ramesh. So there's a big market. So my one being in DC, I wanted to leave one note is basically focus something on federal government too.
And
They
so these
spend
grants are okay for even non-US resident startups?
yes, as long as they can apply. Yeah, they do give grants to non-US
Oh, that is
companies.
good. That's very good.
So
So
that's something
now this
to.
begets a more fundamental question.
Mhm.
Why should a startup even consider US? I mean, like Indian market is big enough. So why and when? Why should they consider US first? I mean, like, what would be your reasons? I mean, because you understand both markets.
I'm sure, Ramesh, that's a fully loaded question. I think we can discuss the whole day, I guess, right? So you lived in US for so long, and you're asking this question. That's really a good question. So, but to address few things, right? Uh, why? I mean, any startup to get in, Ramesh, we have to see the market size in three steps, right?
Hmm.
What is the total addressable market? So that's a basic thing we really look at it, and then the service, available. I mean, service available market, geography or customer base where your customers are. I'm not saying all startups have to look at USA, because last 15 20 years mobile revolution caused India being a good marketplace too. But US market is being more matured, and you have a lot of other amenities and facilities, funding, or strategic relationship, whatnot. You will have opportunity in US market. But going back to your question, like, you have to look at your total addressable market. What is your target audience, right? So whether it can be US or it can be South America, or it can be Canada, anywhere it can be, right? So but you have to do your leg work. That's not like one. If startup is looking at the opportunity, they can look at India market as a whole and US market as a whole. They don't want to restrict only India, right? There are companies, as you know, there's a company House, you probably know, in 19, like few years ago, they started in Silicon Valley, but they ended up in India because a lot of customers from India logging into their company, registering and whatnot, right? So they're into remodeling and all. So as a strategy, they entered into India market. So it's not like one way or the other, but I suggest you have to do your homework. A lot of interesting things about US market, right? If you see the comparison, the ecosystem is big, population is 1/3 of India, but still matured market, informed customers. And if you look at the number of startups in USA, you have like 50,000 any given day, but in India you have like 5,000, right? So that's something you have to look at it. If you're looking at the investor ecosystem, like, you know, you have angel investors, more angel investors in USA than India. Of course, India is catching up big time, even though we are in third in positioning, right? Global positioning in the startups. But if you want more money, more, you know, you know, Ramesh, you know what is happening with the market, right? Where if sometimes the investors in India invest and they expect results like tomorrow, right? So because it's not,
Hmm.
it's the cultural thing, you know, they just want some output or ROI immediately,
I
but
know
may not
for
be
them,
possible.
often real estate or bank is a comparison.
Absolutely.
It needs to
So
beat at least that much. Yeah.
absolutely, you well said, Ramesh. But at the same time, whether it want incubator space or, you know, if you look at the number of unicorns, you want a positive environment when you are working around. So if you come to Silicon Valley, even though you struggle, but you succeed. Now that's what happens, right? Most of the times, you any company, tell me, they had a easy ride in the startup world, right? Everyone goes through the phase, but
Yes.
the
Yes.
consistency, persistency, and the perseverance matters here, right? So you got to take it forward. You know, I mean, we have seen a lot of startups, I mean, they burn like 2-3 box of cigarettes every day, the founders. I know, you know, personally. So it doesn't mean that they're, but you have to consistently manage through
Stay
that
at it.
stress. Yeah, and take it forward. So coming back to the size, right? So definitely US is a market for next generations to come. The bit the size, the served available market or target, or even the CAC, you know, customer acquisition cost, Ramesh, you know, in,
Hmm.
so when you're spending some CAC money, you got to make sure you're spending on a right customer. So I mean, no
The
fun, but
targeting. Yeah.
yeah, no offense, but in India, customers have 4 cell phones. If your business, if product is depending on a mobile user base, is is one customer equal to 4 transactions? Or, you know, how do you define, right?
Yes.
If you
Yes.
come to some mature developed economies, you know, you have only one cell phone. I never had 2 mobiles, right? So I mean, something to look at it. So the founder has to really do good due diligence, you know, why US. So
Understand the market. Understand
yeah,
where they fit in. Yes.
you have 100 reasons to come to USA. There's no one
So the
reason
market
there.
size is huge, worth going after. Market is little
Absolutely.
bit easier maybe.
Hmm.
But then the flip side is like when you're in India, especially in the early stages, the cost of operations is low. Well, the returns also is little lower than yours, but cost is low. So that brings the next question: what is the right time to consider US? I mean, like you want to go to US as soon as possible because that's an easier market and a much bigger market.
Hmm.
But the
Yeah, few
cost
more
of entry is
points.
higher.
Mhm.
But in India, the cost of operation is lower, but the pace of growth also will be lower. So, what is the right time to consider US market in a startup journey?
Yeah, before we go into that question, Ramesh, there are a couple of more things you can consider. You know, US IT market is 1.5 trillion or more. Okay, so you have more appreciation for any of your technology products. Okay, so and any companies, you know, in started, if you take average 20 technology companies founded per year, that reach more than 100 million revenues easily. Okay, so I'm not saying that everyone is going to have a smooth ride, right? But if you take average, every 20, I mean 20 technology companies founded in a year, that's going to reach 100 plus million revenues if their strategy is right, and if they target, their due diligence is right. So most of the times, that's the opportunity you see. And unicorns, if you take unicorns in from 2000, like maybe 10 to 20, there is so much growth, you know, 350-360% of growth rate, Ramesh. So that's kind of motivation, right? See, all startups work based on the passion and the problem solving. So but those two, with a positive environment, definitely lead to a unicorn, really. So I'm going to see a lot more unicorns from India too. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it's not there yet. Okay, you have 10 unicorns so far. Okay, so but if you look at US market, you have more than, you know, so many number of unicorns. So it's a positivity, and the environment, overall environment is going to be very good in USA. So I welcome all the, you know, product owners here, Ramesh.
Yeah, it makes sense. So definitely. Now, so they should consider, no doubt. So,
Mhm.
what is the right time? I mean, like, what kind of stage should they be in, or what kind of validation would they need to be sure? Because again, you don't want to go and experiment in that market. I
Yes.
mean, you don't do your base experiments. You need to do the US experiments anyway.
Hmm.
But base experiments is too expensive to do there, especially for an Indian startup. So,
Yeah.
what should be the stage? What should they have achieved in India before they consider US market? So, what's the right stage to consider the market?
Yeah, I mean, that's a one good question, Ramesh. So when, typically this is the normal question we get: what is the right time to bring my startup to US market? So it's never too early. Okay, so but at the same time, you have to have your things addressed. Your strategy should be there. Again, going back to my previous answer, your TAM, SAM, target market, all your things should be properly
Clear.
tied in. Otherwise, you may be excited about the product, but if you're not ready to come in, don't try it out, because if you fail, you will get demotivated, right? So you have to really do your right strategy around it, and there is no right time, right? So you have to, as a founder or the product owner, when you are really ready.
So at
So
least
whether
you're
you have
saying the
a
product, the strategy should be there.
strategy
Strategy
should
should be
be
validated. You should
there.
understand your market, and you
Yes.
should have some validation at least in India.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
your product or solution should be built and also validated. So you
Yeah,
want the
you have to.
strategy validated and product validated before you get into US.
Absolutely. And also you have to do your homework in terms of extensive research, right? You have to vet things like market size, competition, and what industry they are in, how much money they can raise or they need to spend. Because once you come, as you rightly said, being in India, you have low cost. But once you come, it's going to be 75 times, right? If you're spending a rupee there, $1 is like 75%. That's kind of scale up. You have to be ready for it, right,
Yes.
Ramesh? So that's how you have to see. So the pricing strategy has to be there. So timing is also very crucial. So it's a big factor when you're considering a big market move. So because
Hmm.
it can be cultural thing or the size of the market, many factors, right? And you may be eating, if they never lived or exposed to US market, they probably don't know what is happening. Even though they will probably learn a lot more things on the web, but
Hmm.
being and living here makes more things. So there couple of their visits to US customers and US locations maybe help too, right? And also third thing is seeking out help. So maybe tie up with a incubator. If you are a fintech or if you are a health tech in blockchain, Tennessee, Nashville, nobody is probably thinking about that market. In Nashville has the very positive environment for healthcare
Hmm.
blockchain technologies. They have a great investor group there,
Hmm.
and it's not one location or one place where you can really go. So you have to do a lot of market study for you to be successful. So I'm talking to one startup recently. They are in healthcare, blockchain based
Hmm.
clinical decision system. So they registered in Nashville, Tennessee, and there's a big investors who can even support the market because you're talking their language. It's
Hmm.
all about healthcare, blockchain startup, and they have a
Hmm.
great incubator setup there too. That's
Hmm.
something to
Hmm.
consider.
So they should have that in terms of prep. They should
Hmm.
have the strategy clear, market strategy, and the
Yeah.
proposition should be very clear. They should have the product built, and both of these should have some validation. So that is a bare minimum. You have to do this anyway before you do anything. Are
And
there
also
other
build up
prep
your network, Ramesh. You have to have a
before?
great network because you got to have a great network to ride on. Really,
Hmm.
be it incubation or a good strategic partner. You can even work with a strategic partner who can really handhold you. Any failure for a startup is kind of a killing, right? So you don't want to. I'm not saying failure is bad, but Indian context,
You want to avoid as much as you can.
absolutely.
Yes.
If,
So you
if you
can
can
save
do
some
that,
time and
that's
resources.
absolutely, yeah.
Huh, huh, huh.
That's
So
something to keep in mind.
so prep would be like also do some once you have validated the product and strategy in the Indian market.
Hmm.
You're saying we should do some study of the US market because there'll be some differences,
Yes.
and then identify any channels or partners
Hmm.
that you could work with. If there are partners, that's a fantastic way to get in, and
Yeah.
also identify incubators, relevant incubators, because that's also a good way to get into the market.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then get into the incubator, and through the incubator, explore the market.
Support. Now, unlike before 94, 95, Ramesh. So a lot of companies are at the head of the helm is Indian origin.
Indians.
You may get some connection, and if you're talking their language in terms of the product, they may give you an opportunity, right? So there's a lot of companies started up like that. So, but the product idea has to be very niche, and they should appreciate that.
So
They
that's
will
also part of the legwork then. Before they go,
absolutely.
once they've understood the US market and then figure out what they need to change a little bit, get the positioning and all that done, and then
Yes.
extend the net. I mean, tap the network and see what all companies do they have some contacts. So maybe initiate the
Yes.
email. Still, I'm coming next month. Can I get some time to meet and such? Right. That should be also part of the legwork.
Yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
specific.
But again, if you're sitting in India, you say that, oh, can you block a time next
I
week?
know, no, they don't
You
take
may
that
not get it.
seriously.
So rather you be on the ground. Of course,
Ah.
you may not get first attempt. You're gonna get meeting. I'm not
But
saying that.
at least build the network list at least
Camp
before you
there.
go. At least build a
Absolutely.
list of people before you go who you could meet.
That's
Yeah,
very
I think that's very important. It's one thing to go there; then you should have something to do. You can't.
yes.
So, which I think, and of course, when you meet somebody, always you'll get two more meetings most likely because of that meeting. But the initial set of meetings have to be at least lined up before going. Is
Absolutely.
there any other legwork they should do before traveling on their first visit, sales call?
Research, Ramesh, it's all about your due diligence. The city, I mean, typically in the past, Silicon Valley is being a destination, but that is changed the days now. East Coast becoming a very
Yes.
startup friendly also. So, and as I
Hmm.
said, Nashville, I never thought about it. I know it's a music city, right? So Nashville, we all know people go for music and
Yes.
concerts. But now, last 6 months, I got to know this. Okay, this is something. They have a great incubation center where health tech specific to blockchain. They have a
Hmm.
lot of appetite there. So that's
Hmm.
something to look at it. So now a lot of information is available. Unlike 20 years ago, you had to make a
Yep.
phone call to find information. But now you get pretty much just the research. You have to spend a lot of time on research, and it can yield a lot of good results really.
And that's true. That's a very important legwork. Just understand where to go, why, and all that, and who to meet. And yeah, true.
Yeah.
And so now, what are the, so once they decide to come, how do we, I mean, how does a startup identify where to start? I mean, they need all this legwork and such, but is there any guidance on like, this is somewhere you could start? I mean, like as a general rule of the thumb or guidance, where do they start?
There's nothing like that, Ramesh.
No, because you search on the internet. I mean, like for instance, one thing could be like maybe your network, right? That's a
Mhm.
good starting point because
Yes.
you need references. Yes, sometimes companies responds to a cold call, an email or
Mhm.
a call, but often somebody referring is a better way of getting a response. So is that
Yeah,
a
I mean,
key starting point? You figure out your network, who's where, and like, and where are those relevant companies where you have somebody you know.
as we briefly discussed earlier, so as long as you do those four things like your homework and your timing, you have
Huh.
to do a lot of homework, Ramesh. Yes, asking for a friendly help may to some extent work, but at the same time you have to do homework. What is the fallback? If I don't get help,
Hmm.
am I going to get disappointed and stop working? No, right? So the constant homework of that thing, in the same, whether you want to try healthcare, whether you are in fintech, what is your market segment, right? It all depends on. That's why I said there's no one answer to it. If you're in
Hmm.
health tech, you have to reach out to all biggies in the health tech. So now the data, especially the contact numbers, you all know, like LinkedIn Navigator is a powerful tool, and even Zoom Info. You can have any CEO number, Ramesh. Honestly, I'm not saying that
Hmm.
you're going to reach out to the CEO, but who is a key decision maker? You sign up. That's a worth of investment. So most of the times we see the startups spend a lot of money in terms of the product development R&D, but
Hmm.
very little on the marketing. So if you starting a product development, you parallelly spend some dollars or some rupees on your marketing strategy. Sign up
Hmm.
for a
Hmm.
Zoom Info. I'm not trying
Hmm.
to advocate one or another, but it has a lot of very good information in terms of any key decision makers. So if
Hmm.
you kind of plan your entry such that, okay, if you try 20 companies. See, if you and I know maybe 10 people, but if you go on a tool and figure out the data and find, okay, 20 key decision makers, are they going to 20 going to reject you? No, right? Even two give you an opportunity, that's a
It's
big
very
hit.
good. Yeah.
That's how you have to look at it. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So you have to do your homework, and you have to time it right and seek support. Again, in
Don't
registering
hesitate.
with
You
an
know
incubation.
somebody, just reach out.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And our even network, there are a lot of networks, right? Thai network is there. Okay, so and there are many networks you can sign up. We don't want to do like you do product development, get first customer, then start marketing and sales. That's not going to work that way. So you have to. It has a parallel strategy and parallel process. When you start your product, you know the roadmap. You know who is the potential customers. You know potential the customer base. So you start early enough so that
Yes.
you don't fail in that aspect of it.
True. And also that may also help refine the product better, position the product also better. If you
Absolutely.
understand what customers are looking for, we can just, as you're building, you can
Yeah.
build it for those particular target. I mean, that makes sense. I know many startups worry that, look, what if they say, give me a demo and I don't have a demo? I mean, nobody asks for a demo today. So long as you have something to demo today, the full feature set can come even a month later. Because by the time they get to a
That
point
is
where
the
they do a
timing
deep
and
dive,
the readiness is important, Ramesh. If
yes,
you're not ready, you don't want to give a crappy demo and fail, and then you lose a
yes,
customer, right? That can be a big customer of yours. If you give a failed demo, I mean, first impression is the best impression, right? So you got to do your demos right and
yes.
your meetings right. So you get only one opportunity, and you have to prove it, and prove it to the extent that you can convert them into a regular customer.
Okay, so start doing the legwork, but your demos do it only when you're very confident that the product is good.
As you see, most of it in a half-baked product, we try to give demo on a half-baked product.
Huh.
And once you lose the impression of the customer, it's going to be very hard
No,
for
so they
you
have
to
to be
get it.
careful. Again, a lot of times they tell, look, give a demo with full disclosure, saying, look, we are working on these things. It is coming out in next 2 months or 3 months. This is where we are. But still, at the end of the day, if it doesn't connect with the customer's use case, then you lost them.
But if the buyer is an impulsive, Ramesh, I think that, okay, whether you give me a bad demo today, even two
You
months
lost
down the
them.
line, you give the same thing. Rather, waiting 2 months and giving the best
Is
demo,
better.
talking their language makes your life easier than putting a disclaimer, I'm going to give a bad demo, but please bear with me. I'm
So
going to
it
come
can't
back
be
after
bad
2 months.
demo.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It can't be a bad demo. Yes.
Yeah.
So do it only when you're sure that it's going to connect with the customer.
Absolutely. You
Uh,
you validate it within the circle, within the like-minded entrepreneurs, right? Nothing wrong in it. Hey guys, we did this. Can you please validate and tell us what do you think of this product?
hmm,
Are we ready? From a
hmm, hmm.
third person's point of view. Sometimes your baby is always beautiful to you
I
a
know
bit.
you can't be objective. You've been too involved with
Absolutely,
it. Somebody else should look and
absolutely,
tell. Yes, yes, that is true.
absolutely.
That is true.
That's very important thing.
So, what are the channels? I mean, you did mention like look at Thai and look at, but are there uh, channels and partners that a startup could consider? I know depending on the domain, these things may vary. But are there some tips for a startup to consider in terms of networks to tap into?
Yeah, there are multi channels available. One to channel partners to consider, Ramesh. But
Huh.
startup is startup, right? We have less money and you have a lot of things to do. But channel partners expect a lot more money from you in terms of helping you, right? So to circumvent that, you can take a lot of social networking help now. You can put your product. We are
LinkedIn
having
network,
one.
and
Yeah, I mean you publish it, and if it's again, it depends on what type of product you have. Is it B2C or B2B or B2Z? What is it you have, right? If it's a
see, most
B2C,
Indian
you can pick.
companies going to the US are generally in the B2B space.
Yeah. So,
Some in
but
B2C, but mostly B2B. Yeah.
yeah, if it is a B2B, definitely you need some small channel partner help, but you have to choose a right channel partner. Not many companies have a good experience with the channel partners, Ramesh. I mean,
Hmm.
as far as I know, if you fail to assess the channel partner, you have to take strong references, right? Someone must have did that before
Hmm. Hmm.
you,
Hmm.
right? So you
Hmm.
got to figure out, not just calling a channel partner, hey, we have this product, because your product and your passion may not be my passion, right? I don't care your passion and all. If the product is a right thing, but what is the motivation for them? So they need to be paid. Somebody in Silicon Valley, they charge very hefty money. Are you ready for that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And you have to set your milestones, targets with the channel partner very clearly. If you pull the plug in the last minute, all your investment is going to be wasted, right? So
Yes. Yes.
that's something. Selecting it, I'm not saying that channel partnership is something not a right thing, but you have to choose a right channel partner with
So
the
you
help of.
want a partner who has the right influence in your target group, and who is also
Absolutely.
motivated. I mean, their motivation to work with you should be right motivation. Either it's
Yeah.
a
See, for
complementing
them,
technology or something that excites them, maybe whatever it is, revenue or, but their motivation should be right.
absolutely. See, for channel partners, Ramesh, they may be supporting a lot more companies, right? For you, product is your own thing, your life, bread and
Yes.
butter.
Yes.
So you when you're betting your life and bread and butter on somebody, you better make sure select a right channel partner. But if they're in a B2C environment, they can heavily depend on social media. And at the same time, you have to earn your first customer. The founder has to earn first customer, Ramesh. That's only best way you can even validate. Giving it to a channel partner and getting rid of your responsibility is not going to get you anywhere. You got to sell, and you have to
Yes.
believe in it and sell it. Then prove that, hey, I sold this to
So
so
the
and
channels
so.
come later. I mean, the initial
Yes.
effort should be directly founder's effort, using
Yes.
personal network or whatever, or cold calling even. But only after the initial traction, only then look at channels.
Absolutely. If you put 100% bet on channel partners, you're going to fail. Definitely going to fail, Ramesh. There's no question about
No,
it.
that's true. I mean, nobody can understand the product better than the founder. So the initial thing has to
Absolutely.
come from the founders.
Hmm.
Once it is validated, then maybe channels can pitch in. So that
Absolutely.
brings in a related question. So
Mhm.
now, if you're not going to use channels and your networks are limited, your personal networks, how well does cold calling work? You just send a LinkedIn message or an email. How well does it typically work? Of course, your case has to be clear.
Mhm.
I mean, all that's assuming all that is done. The mail is very targeted, very specific. Tries to communicate the value. How well does it work? Cold calling.
Cold calling does work. It's a proven
It does.
market tool,
It
but
does. Huh.
you have to be consistently doing it, right, Ramesh? Your messaging has to be right. You don't want to send like 10-page email
And
and
also not
do
a very
a
generic
call.
one. Also.
Yeah, messaging is very important there.
Huh.
Cold call alone uh, do it, but after consistent tries, you will definitely get it. But I'm not saying that if you do, if the caller doesn't convey the message, right, and the recipient, it's not going to do any good
So
for
the
you.
message is the most important here. It should be very
Messaging is
crisp,
very
clear,
important.
and very specific. So that assuming they read the mail, they should see it and then want to respond. Meaning it should be that specific and that compelling.
Typically cold call is a third attempt, right? You do first put some marketing material out there through social media or email or some digital marketing, whatever the way you want to do it, but
Huh.
you don't want to pick up a call and explain the whole
No, but email also, if it's a cold email, meaning no reference,
Mhm.
the response is generally okay if they send an email with no connection.
Sometimes yes,
Huh.
if it's an it happens, success comes through even cold
So even
email
there, the
call.
same thing you said applies. I mean, they should be very specific, compelling. If somebody reads it, they should say, like, look, this makes sense. Let me find out more.
Your target audience, Ramesh, if I'm in fintech finance market, if you're sending me something about health tech, am I going to really look at it? So you have to be very specific. You have to do again homework there in terms of who is your really target audience are going to be. That's only
Yes.
way he or she can open the email or read it, right?
Huh.
If once they read it, if you have a compelling story, they're not going to reject it because they also equally need a
So that
product.
homework is the most important. Your story
Absolutely.
must be good, positioning must be good, and reach the right person
Absolutely. That's very
that
important.
can connect with it and do something about it. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Yes. That's
So last question, we just hit the time already. We crossed the
oh.
time. But one now, how good are the? I mean, as an investor, as a channel to get into the US, how effective is it? I mean, like, is there something that startups should seriously consider? As it won't, it's not a complete channel, but investors, is it a good avenue to tap into through the investors get to their networks?
Yeah, absolutely. Any channel. See, if I know you, I'm happy to engage any conversation, right, Ramesh? Anything coming from you, it's been already vetted. So I appreciate and acknowledge that, right? So rather than a random person doing it,
Hmm.
so that's something you have to see. Going through
So
referrals and going through the network is going to always
investor
benefit.
networks is
Yeah.
definitely okay. Yeah. So true. I think they need to understand the markets first, make sure that positioning is clear, who and why,
Yes.
and then see where the networks are, whether it's investors or other networks to those companies.
One last thing I want to comment that typically what I have seen with some of the startups I worked with, shiny object syndrome, they get
Huh.
distracted. They don't just focus. Any startup, you got to be laser sharp focused, right? Otherwise, you're gonna fail. So, I mean, I was working with one fintech, and it's a Paytm kind of company.
Hmm.
Those days, it would
Hmm.
have been hit those kind of numbers, but the CEO kind of shiny object syndrome, he got attracted to some services business. One day we are in a board meeting. He said, Lax, I'm doing something with Ohio state government and services. I said, what are you doing? Why are you even focusing on services? You're not into services. You're a product guy. You're
Hmm.
focused fintech. And those are the times demonetization came. Paytm
Huh.
is rocking. It should have been not Paytm, but second to Paytm should have been
So
in the
they
position.
lost an opportunity.
Absolutely, because you have only 14-40 minutes, Ramesh. You got to spend your time in an appropriate manner, right? So
Huh. Huh.
even the startups, we ended up burning midnight oil, but got to spend your time very wisely in terms of not to distract yourself into any other things. Because when you invest, as Kenvil Reiki says, you invest in person, not in a product. You got to see how stable the person is, how passionate the person is. See, sometimes you ended up changing the technology, you ended up changing the product, but you cannot change a person. So if the person is great, founder is great, you can bet on it.
You
That's
know
what
that they will do the right things.
absolutely, yeah.
True. That's very important. I mean, yes, you got to be emotionally connected to the whole broad problem area in the
Absolutely.
business, but not the specifics of the product. You should be willing to change. True.
Yes.
So on that note, Lax, thank you so much. It was fantastic. I think this is the topic is quite broad and deep. Getting into a new market anywhere is not an easy thing, and getting into a new country is even bigger, especially a country like US. But I think we did touch upon some of the key elements that a startup should be
I
aware of
hope so,
before
Ramesh. Yeah.
considering. So thank you so much, Lax. And I'm
Thank
sure now through the SucSEED Fund, I think we will hopefully get more startups that get into the portfolio and then explore the US markets. So I
very
think I'm
much,
sure we'll
Ramesh.
back
I'm
into your
very much
network.
excited to be, taking SucSEED to the next level with a lot of great startups in the portfolio. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure
then
it'll happen. I'm sure
get
it'll
to know
happen.
you.
So thank you, Lax. Thanks for the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.